Hey guys, tonight we're going to travel to the highlands of 14th century Ethiopia, a place where the mornings begin with smoke, steam, and the quiet rustle of barley stalks in the wind. You're nestled inside a round mud and thatch tukul, your home, and outside, the air smells faintly of wood smoke and the mossy fog that settles on everything before the sun rises. There's no electricity, no clocks, and the roosters already tried and failed to get anyone moving. But inside, your grandmother is already awake, and that means breakfast has begun. You're not exactly ready for the day. Nobody is, really, in the 1300s. But the hearth needs tending. There's no button to push, no microwave beep. Instead, you shuffle over to a blackened pit in the floor where the embers from last night's fire are still warm. With practiced fingers, she adds a twist of dried dung. Yes, dung, but don't wrinkle your nose just yet, and fans the coals back to life. Soon, thin blue smoke snakes upward, curling toward the cone-shaped ceiling and escaping through the smoke hole. Your job, still bleary-eyed, is to fetch water. The gourd jug is heavy and awkward, and the stream is not exactly close. But once you're back, the rhythm of the morning begins to take shape. In a pot, crushed barley grains simmer slowly with water and a pinch of salt, maybe even some wild garlic if you're lucky today. The porridge, called genfo, thickens to something between mashed potatoes and concrete. You'll be handed a wooden spoon with a chipped handle, but honestly, most of the family eats with their fingers, forming small scoops and dipping it into a hollowed-out well of spiced butter in the center. That butter, by the way, is no joke. It's niter kibe, clarified and infused with garlic, fenugreek, and maybe even a bit of koseret, an herb that tastes like oregano and lemon got into a wrestling match. It hits your nose before it hits your tongue, and the result is strangely comforting, like warmth in edible form. The butter crackles in the center of the porridge mound, melting slightly as the whole family sits in a loose circle around the dish. There are no chairs, no plates, no cell phones, just a shared bowl and a gentle morning quiet. You glance outside. It's still foggy, the kind that clings to your eyelashes and makes goats look like floating ghosts. Your little cousin A.S. already shooing chickens away from the doorframe, while a neighbor drops off a bundle of firewood, nodding in greeting. There's no rush. Breakfast isn't fast or grab and go. It's slow, communal, a sort of edible prayer to begin the day. Historians still argue whether genfo was universally eaten every day or reserved for particular occasions like childbirth, hard labor, or holy days. But in this village, your fictional but historically plausible one, it's the reliable first act of the day, simple and sustaining. And here's a curious tidbit. 14th century Ethiopians sometimes flavored their breakfast with a few drops of tais-ej, a fermented honey wine, especially if they were older or celebrating something. Imagine sipping a boozy, honeyed drink before the sun rises, your stomach full of barley paste and garlic butter. Cheers to medieval hydration strategies. Meanwhile, your grandmother sprinkles a pinch of ash onto the hearth's edge, muttering something about keeping the spirits content. You don't ask questions. You refocused on the last spoonful of genfo that somehow has the perfect ratio of salt to butter to heat. And, before long, someone will be sent out to collect enset stalks or sweep the yard with a bundled twig broom. But not yet. Not until the food is finished. The inside of your home smells of barley, smoke, and warm milk, the kind that still has flecks of hay and a grassy scent to it. There are no clocks on the wall, no traffic outside, no to-do list except maybe, Don T forget to keep the goats from eating the laundry. You lean back against the woven basket wall, already a little sleepy again. But the day is just beginning, and breakfast, as always, sets the tone. One final note before we drift into the next bite of history. While modern breakfast routines hinge on speed, toast in one hand, keys in the other, your 14th century Ethiopian self has the luxury of time, and maybe a little smoky butter breath, but nobody minds. By now, the genfo is long gone, scraped clean down to the smudges of butter-slicked wood in the center of the communal bowl. You are still licking your fingers when your aunt begins the next essential part of the morning, preparing injera. Ah yes, injera, sour, spongy, oddly comforting, and the culinary backbone of every Ethiopian day, whether it's breakfast or a midnight snack. Today's batch was actually started days ago, and that's what makes it so magical. Teff flour, milled from a grain smaller than a poppy seed, has been fermented with water in a clay pot resting in the corner of your tukul. You didn't think too much about that bubbling mixture before, but now that the lid comes off, it releases a tangy aroma that could clear a stuffy nose from across the room. Your aunt stirs the teff batter with a carved wooden ladle, murmuring something about how the bubbles mean the gods are pleased, or maybe the starter hassa just extra strong this week. Either way, she's happy, and so are you, because it means today's injera will be especially fluffy, or rather, especially holy. That's the goal, you learn. The eyes of injera, those little bubbles that form across its surface like moon craters. A well-made injera should look like the lunar surface got a sourdough makeover. But you don't get those perfect eyes without the matad, the heavy, flat, clay griddle that sits on 3 stones over the fire, waiting like a sleeping dragon. You stoke the coals and watch as the mitad warms, its surface going from dull brown to a faint, smoking gray. Here's the part you always mess up: the pour. Your aunt lifts a gourd full of the fermented batter and in one fluid, practiced motion, spirals it onto the mitad, starting from the outside and circling inward. There's a hissing sound as it hits the heat, and then silence, save for the bubbling. She slaps on a lid made from woven palm and waits, still as a mountain. 30 seconds pass. Then she lifts the lid and victory! The surface is riddled with bubbles, the color soft and pale, with a lacy edge that curls slightly upward like the brim of a delicate hat. She folds it in half, then in quarters, stacking it with the others under a cloth to keep warm. And just like that, she's pouring the next one, already moving in the rhythm that injera demands. Historians still argue whether injera, in its fermented form, dates back quite this far, or developed slightly later. But one thing's clear: it was around by the 14th century in various forms, and it wasn't just food. It was social glue. The act of making it, serving it, eating from the same sheet, these were rituals that shaped how you related to your family, your neighbors, even strangers. Oh, and here's your quirky fact of the day. There was once a belief in some rural areas that a poorly fermented batch of injera meant someone in the family had been telling lies. Yes, lie detectors, 1300 style, made of batter. Meanwhile, outside, the fog has started to lift. The goats are complaining. A rooster, who apparently missed his own alarm, finally finds his voice. Your job now is to help set the breakfast cloth. It's not a table, not really. Just a low, woven mat with a smaller mat on top where the injera will be spread. No forks, just fingers. A scoop of lentil stew, a smear of clarified butter, a pinch of dried crushed pepper, and the sacred act of tearing off a piece of injera and offering it to someone else. That's called gursha, feeding another person by hand, gently placing the bite in their mouth as a gesture of love, respect, or if you're lucky, apology. Your cousin tries to feed you a ridiculously large bite, which you somehow survive without choking, and then you get your revenge. This goes back and forth, both of you laughing, butter on your cheeks, eyes watering from a surprise chili flake. Eventually, the adults settle things down, and everyone eats properly. Slowly, sleepily. There's no rush. The sun is just cresting the mountains, casting a pale golden light that filters through the smoke hole above you. The injera stack grows thinner. Someone ladles the last bit of stew onto a corner. You lick your fingers again. Not a crumb left behind. Injera, it turns out, isn't just the plate. It's also the utensil. And the cleanup crew. Everything disappears into it. Stew, lentils, even that odd pickled green you didn't recognize. By the end, the final piece has absorbed everything, like an edible sponge of joy. You sit back, full and warm, the hearth still glowing in the corner. Outside, the village is starting to wake up. A man walks by with a bundle of firewood on his back. A girl chases a runaway chicken, and a distant drumbeat thumps from the church down the hill. Morning in 14th century Ethiopia is fully underway, and all you had to do to be part of it was wake up and eat. You're still in a post-injera haze, belly full and fingers pleasantly sticky, when a sudden whiff of something rich and nutty wafts your way. It's unmistakable. Someone's melting niter kibbe again, and this time, it's more than just a dollop for porridge. The butter in question is no ordinary butter. It's niter kibbe, the buttery cornerstone of Highland flavor, and it deserves a closer look. See, in your 14th century Ethiopian kitchen, butter isn't simply butter. It's personality, preserved in a gourd. To make it, someone, usually the most trusted elder or the fussiest aunt, starts by churning fresh zebu milk until it separates. That might take hours, by the way. There's no electric churner here, just patience, rhythmic rocking, and maybe a song or two about stubborn cows and even more stubborn husbands. Once the butter rises, it's strained, clarified over a gentle flame, and then infused with a cascade of local aromatics. Garlic is a must. Fenugreek seeds add a mild bitterness. Bisobela, the local basil, goes in whole, leaves and all. And then there's koseret again. Earthy and citrusy, like oregano with a wild streak. A hint of turmeric stains the whole pot a rich golden color, like sunshine with ambitions. Your aunt lifts the lid on the small ceramic jar where today's batch has been warming, and the scent hits you square in the soul. It smells like breakfast, like security, like a story passed down in the language of fat and fire. She ladles a spoonful into a shallow dish and sets it near the edge of the hearth where it can melt slowly, just waiting for someone to dip something, anything into it. Historians still debate just how universal the use of niter kibbe was across Ethiopia in the 14th century. Some suggest it was primarily a highland delicacy, favored by wealthier or more agriculturally fortunate households. Others argue that even modest homes could produce small quantities for sacred meals or festivals. But one thing's clear: if you had it, you used it. Often, lavishly. You sneak a closer sniff. There's a flicker of something extra in this batch, maybe a piece of dried ginger root or a sliver of black cardamom. Recipes weren't written down. They were memorized in the bones. Each family's kibbe tasted a little different, just like each family's way of wrapping injera or blessing the fire. Oh, and here's today's peculiar tidbit. In some Ethiopian traditions, butter wasn't just food. It was also hair product. Not kidding. Before heading out for special events or religious days, folks, especially women, would work spiced butter into their braids to condition the hair and infuse it with scent. So if you thought Grandma's head smelled suspiciously like breakfast, well, it probably did. Back to your morning. The dish of niter kibbe is placed in the center of a small woven tray. Someone brings over flatbread, leftover from yesterday, warmed over the fire, and you tear off a piece, dip it, and wait. The butter seeps in, coats your tongue, and brings everything into focus. It's not a bold flavor exactly, more like a whisper that lingers and deepens the longer you chew. You glance at your younger cousin, who's got a streak of melted butter running down his chin. A goat bleats outside, reminding everyone it's probably time to start doing something productive, but the adults just shrug and lean back. The butter's still warm, the hearth still glows, and productivity can wait. Just outside, your uncle is tending to the storage gourd where future batches of clarified butter will be kept. These gourds are coated with smoke inside, yes, on purpose, which adds a faintly medicinal, woodsy taste to the kibbe over time. And don't even think about putting anything else in that gourd. The butter lives there like royalty, and the gourd gets its own place of honor on a high shelf. There's a ritual to all of it. Making kibe isn't something you do in a rush. It's a quiet process, usually accompanied by gossip, humming, or the kind of silence that only old friends and well-seasoned cooks know how to share. And once the butter's made, it's not just an ingredient. It's a celebration. You smear it on porridge, melt it into lentils, float it on stew, and yes, if you've got a sore tooth, someone might even rub a bit on your gums while muttering a prayer. The tukul fills with that soft, buttery scent, as another small pot is placed on the coals, this time with mashed fava beans and a pinch of crushed coriander. Your aunt stirs it slowly, the spoon clinking against the side. Once it's done, she'll swirl in a generous spoonful of the golden kibe, and the whole dish will shimmer like it's been blessed. You, of course, will hover impatiently until she lets you taste the edge with your fingers. It burns a little, but it's worth it. Breakfast in 14th century Ethiopia isn't a plate. It's a process, a rhythm, and nothing beats niter kibbeh for setting the tone of the day. Smooth, spiced, and slightly mysterious, just like your grandmother when she catches you trying to sneak an extra piece of flatbread. You'd think, after all that genfo and injera and golden pools of niter kibbeh, breakfast would be over. But in this world, the day isn't truly awake until the buna ceremony begins. That's right. Coffee, Ethiopia's liquid gift to the world, and in the 14th century, it's not served in a to-go cup. The fire is already being stoked again, fresh twigs added beneath a small earthen brazier. You watch as your aunt rinses green coffee beans in a shallow basket, then pours them into a pan. No shortcuts here. Roasting comes first. Slow, careful, coaxing out the oils until the whole house smells like the very definition of morning. You lean close, and your nose tingles with the sharp, grassy scent of the unroasted beans transforming. Your aunt moves the pan in practiced circles, shaking the beans until they go from pale jade to dark brown. Not burnt, never burnt, but perfectly toasted with tiny cracks forming along the seams. She pauses once to let you sniff the smoke, a sacred invitation. It smells like sun-warmed soil, like toasted hazelnuts, like something older than memory. Now comes the pounding. The beans go into a small stone mortar, and you take your turn with the pestle. Awkward at first, but quickly finding your rhythm. It's not powder you're making, just a coarse grind, enough to steep. When your arms start to ache, your cousin takes over, humming something tuneless but hypnotic. Meanwhile, water is heating in a round-bellied black clay pot with a narrow neck, the jabina. Historians still argue whether the full buna ceremony as we know it today, with 3 rounds, incense, and elaborate etiquette, was already fully developed by the 14th century. Some say the roots go deeper than the coffee trees themselves, while others suggest it formalized much later. But the act of roasting, grinding, and brewing coffee as a shared ritual, that was absolutely a thing. And here's a quirky detail that makes you grin. In some parts of Ethiopia back then, certain elders would sniff a batch of roasted beans and declare the fortune of the household based on the aroma. A bit smoky. Rain's on the way. Too sharp? Someone's been hiding secrets. Honestly, it's the kind of logic that makes as much sense as any weather forecast you've ever heard. Now the coffee is steeping inside the jabina, the ground beans swirling like dark clouds in hot water. There's no filter, just time, heat, and gravity doing their quiet work. Your aunt rubs her palms with a pinch of salt. Yes, salt, because sometimes a few grains go into the cup. Sweetness hadn't fully infiltrated the Ethiopian palate yet, especially not in remote highland villages, and a salty cup of buna was just the thing to cut through a morning fog. Meanwhile, someone adds a pinch of frankincense to a glowing coal. The scent drifts upward like a ribbon, curling around the rafters, mingling with the aroma of roasted beans. The house hushes, like the whole family is leaning in, listening to the silence steep. Then, with a graceful tilt, your aunt pours the coffee into tiny, handleless cups. The stream arches perfectly from the long spout, a steady ribbon of dark liquid. The first round is called a bowl, strongest, boldest. The second, Tona, is softer. The third, Baraka, is more like a blessing than a beverage. You take your first sip and blink. It's earthy, strong, a little salty, and somehow perfect. No one gulps. This is not your grab-it-on-the-way-to-work brew. This is slow, reverent, conversational. People swap stories, tease one another, plan their day. You catch snippets about who needs to go to market, who might be expecting guests, which oxen need attention, and whether the rain will finally come. And while you sit sipping Buna, you realize something. This isn't just about the caffeine. It's about being still long enough to notice each other, to smell the beans, hear the pestle strike the stone, feel the heat of the cup in your hand. The ceremony is the point. Here, in something you didn't expect, there's a pecking order to who gets served first. Elders, then men, then women, then children. But you, being a guest, or at least guest adjacent in your time-traveling dream state, are handed a cup early, a quiet honor. You nod politely, then try not to grimace at the heat as it singes your tongue. Everyone saw. Everyone chuckles. You sip slower the second time. Outside, the village is fully awake now. Smoke rises from other hearths. A donkey brays with theatrical intensity. The sun filters through the doorway in slanted beams, catching dust motes like fireflies. You sit with your legs tucked beneath you, one hand wrapped around the warm clay cup, the other resting on the edge of the woven mat. And suddenly you're struck by how many mornings have probably started this way. Hundreds of years, thousands of cups. By now, your limbs are loose, your thoughts slow, and your belly buzzes with the heat of 3 tiny cups of salty Buna. But there's still one thing missing from your 14th century Ethiopian breakfast tableau: the sound of chewing something crunchy. Enter the humble, ever-surprising kolo, roasted barley, served warm in a woven basket, eaten by the pinch. You glance to the side where someone's already shaking a handful onto a palm, the little grains clicking together like pebbles in a stream. You reach out, grab a few, and pop them into your mouth. Crunch. Nutty. Warm. Satisfying in a way that only the simplest foods can be. Kolo is more than a snack. It's a punctuation mark. A little bridge between the last sip of Buna and the first chore of the day. And it's not just barley, by the way. Depending on the household, the season, or the mood of whoever's roasting it, kolo can include wheat berries, chickpeas, or even lentils. Whatever's available, really, though barley remains the classic. You might imagine someone shaking it over an iron pan on the fire, brow furrowed in concentration, trying not to scorch a single kernel. And you'd be right. Roasting kolo takes practice, patience, and timing. Burn it, and you'll hear about it all day. Undercook it, and you might as well serve pebbles. In some villages, roasting kolo is even an afternoon ritual. Not just for breakfast, something to nibble while the elders talk politics, or while children try to guess how many grains they can hold in one hand. There's even a game involving hiding a single charred grain in a pile and making someone find it blindfolded. You can guess how that ends, with a lot of laughter and at least one dramatic choking act. Historians still puzzle over how widespread kolo was during the 14th century. Was it strictly a highland treat, thanks to barley's preference for cooler, elevated climates? Or was it found in warmer lowland regions too, adapted with local grains? No one agrees. But what's not disputed is its staying power. Kolo stuck around. It's still a go-to in modern Ethiopia, sometimes tucked into newspaper cones and sold on street corners, the same way it probably was, in a different form, centuries ago. You munch slowly, grain by grain. Each has a slightly different flavor, some earthier, some crispier, some with a hint of fire still clinging to them. There's no seasoning, no oil, no frills, just roasted grain and time. It's a deeply local food, something not meant to travel or be exported, but to be shared. You notice the basket never stays in one lap for long. It's passed around, hand to hand, without a word. Sharing is just assumed. Now, here's the curious bit you weren't expecting. Some communities treated the act of roasting kolo as a quiet form of hospitality training. That's right. You'd be evaluated, gently of course, on how even your roasting was, whether you overhandled the barley, how warmly you passed the basket to guests. Not exactly a culinary competition, but definitely a test of domestic finesse. A kind of edible etiquette. Someone brings out a twist of dried honeycomb. No, not to eat like candy, although you kind of wish. It's to show the children what last season's harvest yielded. They peer at the delicate wax lattice, giggle, and ask 1,000 questions about bees. You watch one of the elders lean in to explain how the hives are placed near teff fields, and how honey isn't really for children anyway. It's for weddings, mead, and priestly offerings. And now, a wild card enters breakfast. A guest. Not a time traveler like you, but a neighbor, barefoot and grinning, arriving with a palm leaf pouch tied at the hip. You recognize the etiquette instantly. Bring something small, get invited in. She unwraps her pouch to reveal a handful of dried juniper berries and a pinch of black cumin. They'll probably end up in someone's pot later. For now, she sits, accepts a handful of kolo, and sighs like she's just settled into her favorite armchair. There's no rush to wrap up the morning. Even with tasks ahead, livestock to tend, water to haul, this breakfast feels like the real business of the day. It's where everything begins. Food, stories, shared glances, sleepy jokes. You catch someone teasing your cousin for burning the porridge last week. He denies it, of course, but the collective snort says otherwise. By the time the last grain of kolo has been picked clean from the basket, the coals have died down to a soft glow. Someone adds a few eucalyptus leaves, not for cooking, but to scent the space. The oils crackle faintly in the warmth, releasing a bright, nose-tingling aroma that cuts through the buttery haze. You stretch your legs. Your aunt is already wrapping up the leftovers, what little there are, in a strip of woven cloth. She tucks them onto a high shelf, far from wandering goats or greedy hands, and then, without ceremony, she stands, dusts off her skirt, and steps into the sun. Time to face the day. You linger a moment longer, brushing a few stray grains from your lap. The hearth crackles quietly. A rooster calls in the distance, and you realize, with a kind of peaceful clarity, you're not just watching breakfast happen. You're living inside a slow, rich rhythm of time that hasn't changed all that much in 600 years. And the best part? There's still more to eat later. You're up now, stepping carefully across the packed earth floor, your legs still a little sleepy from sitting cross-legged for so long. The morning meal might be finished, but in 14th century Ethiopia, food preparation never really stops. It just shifts gears. And the next gear? Fermentation. Remember that injera from earlier? That spongy, tangy marvel of a flatbread that scooped up your breakfast like a warm, edible towel? Well, now's your chance to learn where it comes from, starting with a glance into a very old, very stubborn clay pot. This pot doesn't sit on the fire. No, it lives in a dark, cool corner of the house like a beloved but slightly unpredictable houseguest. Inside, a slurry of teff flour and water, bubbling softly. It's air show, the mother starter, passed down from generations, and let me tell you, this thing has moods. Teff is the star of the show here. Tiny, mighty, and older than your oldest aunt's favorite folk tale, teff is a native grain that thrives in the highlands. It's so small that a single handful feels like holding dry mist. But it's dense with nutrition and carries a faintly nutty flavor once cooked. Your cousin lifts the pot lid, and you're greeted by a faintly sour scent. Not unpleasant, just ancient. Like wet stone and lemon peel. The batter inside moves slowly, like lava in a dream. It's alive, literally. You lean in close and swear you hear the tiniest hiss, like it's breathing. Maybe it is. Here's the thing. Fermentation takes time, but it also takes instinct. There are no thermometers, no timers, no commercial yeast packets. Your aunt judges readiness by smell, texture, even the way the bubbles rise. It's part science, part sorcery. Historians still argue about when, exactly, fermentation became widespread in Ethiopian cuisine. Some believe it stretches back to the kingdom of Deemed, or even earlier, while others suggest the technique spread across regions more recently via cultural exchange along trade routes. Whatever the truth, by the 14th century, this fermentation practice is deeply rooted in both everyday cooking and spiritual rhythm. And it's not just injera that ferments. Oh no. While you watch, someone uncovers another pot, this one cooler, darker, and covered with a tightly woven lid. Inside, tej, the honey wine. Or at least what will become tej. Right now, it's still cloudy and gently fizzing with yeasts doing their invisible dance. You raise an eyebrow. Wine? At breakfast? Not quite. Tej is mostly for feasts, rituals, weddings. But the brewing, that starts whenever the honey is fresh. And in some homes, especially wealthier ones, there's always a batch in progress. It's flavored with gesho leaves, a sort of bittering agent like hops, and has a soft golden haze that catches the light like morning fog in a bottle. There's a quirky superstition you overhear in a half-whisper. If you open a teji pot while angry, it will sour. If you sing to it, or just hum while stirring, it'll turn out smoother. Science may scoff, but you watch your aunt absent-mindedly hum as she stirs the honey mash with a carved stick. Coincidence, or tradition cloaked in melody? Now comes the fun part, the griddle. A heavy, round clay disc, blackened from years of service, is set atop a low tripod of stones. Beneath it, dried dung patties are fed into the fire. Yes, you heard that right. Dung. It burns slow, clean, and steady. Surprisingly efficient, really. The injera batter, now perfectly tangy, is ladled onto the hot griddle in a wide spiral. It sizzles instantly. Tiny holes forming across the surface as steam escapes. Those are the eyes, the eye net, and a proper injera has many. A lid goes over the top. A few moments pass. Then the lid lifts, and there it is. A perfect circle of soft, hole-speckled flatbread. It's flipped not with a spatula, but with practiced fingers. Your aunt stacks them on a basket lined with banana leaves. The steam curls upward in soft ribbons. The smell is faintly sweet, faintly sour, completely comforting. You resist the urge to rip a piece right off the stack. Barely. Now, here's a funny little historical footnote. In certain noble households, injera was so prized that dedicated servants were tasked only with its preparation. And if a visiting guest brought their own starter mix as a gift, it was considered a token of serious friendship, like sourdough diplomacy. You step back as the next round of batter is poured. The fire crackles. A hen clucks outside, offended that breakfast is over without her. You catch your reflection in a polished brass bowl, warped and smiling. The fermenting pots are covered again, their contents left to slumber until it's their time. Injera stacks are cooling. Tej bubbles silently, and the kitchen air now carries a scent you'll remember long after you wake. Tangy, warm, and old as the hills. The day is moving forward, but here, in this hearth-shadowed corner, it feels like time still stretches, like a slow fermentation of hours. No alarms, no rush, just clay pots, quiet bubbles, and the kind of work that happens in rhythms you can feel in your bones. And as you lean against the wall, watching the next injera bubble and hiss, you think, no wonder this bread became the edible heart of an entire cuisine. It's not just food, it's patience, preserved. You're already halfway through the morning now, your belly comfortably full, and your limbs loose as overcooked noodles. You wander outside, blinking at the soft highland sun. A gentle breeze rustles through eucalyptus leaves, carrying with it a dry, sweet scent and the distant sound of someone beating laundry near the river. But don't get distracted. We're not here to do chores. We're here to follow your nose, because, believe it or not, there's more to the Ethiopian breakfast world than injera and porridge. You catch a whisper of something frying. Yes, frying. a rare treat given how precious cooking oil is. But sometimes, especially after a feast day, a few spoonfuls of nieder kibe, that rich, spiced, clarified butter, are set aside for breakfast snacks. And that's when something special happens. Fried breakfast bites. Today, someone's making çeçebsa. Or, depending on the region, it might be called kita firfir. Either way, you're in for a treat. Imagine thick flatbread torn into little scraps, tossed into a clay pan sizzling with seasoned butter. The bread soaks up the fat like a sponge, turning crispy at the edges, soft in the middle. Add a sprinkle of berber spice, fiery red and deeply fragrant, and suddenly your sleepy morning has a kick. The cook stirs quickly, the torn pieces hopping around in the pan like panicked beetles. You lean in, sniffing. Garlic, fenugreek, maybe a hint of ginger. And then, just to make things even more decadent, someone drizzles honey over the top. Spicy, buttery, and sweet. Breakfast meet contradiction. Here's your fringe detail for the day. In some 14th century households, cooks would mash in bitter wild greens during fasting periods when dairy and meat were off limits. Others might sneak in crushed roasted chickpeas to bulk up the dish when wheat was scarce. It wasn't just about taste, it was about ingenuity, and filling bellies with whatever the land could give. Çeçebsa wasn't an everyday food, too rich, too fussy, but on special mornings, or when surprise guests appeared, it could emerge like a sunrise on a plate. You watch the cook spoon out portions onto shared bowls, steam curling lazily upward. A child tries to swipe an edge-crisped scrap before it's cooled and gets a soft cluck from their mother. Worth it. And then comes a curious variation. Someone brings out a slab of leftover kita, the griddle flatbread that often gets overlooked next to injera. Drier, sturdier, more like a rustic pancake. It's chopped and mixed into a bowl with fresh butter, salt, and a dash of chili. No frying here, just mashing and folding until it becomes a dense, savory mash. A quick, peasant-style breakfast, nothing fancy but oddly addictive. Think of it like the 14th century Ethiopian answer to buttered toast scraps. Historians still debate whether dishes like çeçebsa were reserved for the upper classes or whether versions existed across all social strata. Was it a royal breakfast indulgence, a roadside stall snack, or simply something any clever grandmother could whip up if she had an extra splash of oil and time to spare? The written records are sparse, the archaeology even more so. But ask around, and oral traditions will tell you, if the kitchen smelled like sizzling butter, someone was in a good mood. Meanwhile, nearby, another breakfast table is unfolding, this one over a fire pit with a tin pot bubbling away. Someone's brewing atmit, a warm barley drink thickened with flour and spiced with cardamom and sometimes dried ginger. It's less like tea, more like porridge you can sip, especially beloved by mothers, the elderly, and anyone needing a gentle start to the day. You take a bowl of it, careful, it's hot, and sip slowly. Smooth, grainy, with a nutty undertone and that whisper of spice that makes you want to close your eyes. No caffeine, no alcohol, just warmth that trickles down your throat and rests heavy in your stomach. You can feel the barley settling into your bones, telling your cells, relax, we're safe. A funny aside, there was once a tale of a monk who lived for a whole Lent season on nothing but atmit and the occasional fig. Was it true? Probably not. But it makes a great excuse to ask for a second bowl. Nearby, a group of young women are sitting cross-legged laughing over a shared plate of çeçebsa, tearing pieces apart and comparing who got the crispiest edge. You overhear a debate about whether honey should go on top or be served in a separate bowl for dipping. No consensus is reached. Then someone mentions a superstition you weren't expecting. If your çeçebsa comes out too oily, it means your in-laws are gossiping about you. Whether that makes you giggle or worry is up to you. The sun climbs higher. The smells begin to fade. The firewood burns low. You wipe your hands on your tunic, sticky from honey and butter, and stretch your legs. There's a stillness in the air now, a kind of hush that follows fullness. The birds sing louder. The goats nudge each other lazily. Even the dogs lie down, eyes half shut, dreaming of dropped scraps and warm mornings. You've now tasted not just the food, but the rhythm of breakfast in 14th century Ethiopia. Its richness, its surprises, its deep practicality. From bubbling injera pots to sizzling scraps and barley drinks that taste like safety, you've wandered through a culinary world as diverse as it is comforting. And, best of all, it's not over yet. There are still pickled mysteries to discover, and spices that sting, then soothe. But first, maybe sit a while. Let the butter settle. You're sitting back now, one hand resting on your comfortably full belly, the other absently tracing circles in the dust. You've sipped the barley drink, stolen the crispiest bit of chechebsa, and even caught yourself yawning. But the kitchen doesn't sleep. Not yet. There's always something else bubbling, brining, or baking. And now, your ears pick up the faint clink of pottery being opened. You turn your head slowly like a lazy cat and spot an elder lifting the lid off a large red clay jar buried partway in the ground. What you smell next? Sharp, sour, earthy, something fermented, yes, but not the sour of batter or wine. This smells like thyme. Welcome to the world of pickled things. In 14th century Ethiopia, pickling wasn't just a culinary flourish, it was essential preservation. The highland climate could swing between generous and stubborn, so food needed to be stored for lean seasons, for travel, or just for the satisfaction of biting into something bright and sharp after a long stretch of boiled roots. And here, in this quiet corner of the kitchen compound, is a trove of surprises. The elder scoops into the jar and reveals pale green strips of something you can quite identify. It's gomen azifa, pickled mustard greens, sour and peppery. In some versions, they're mixed with lentils. In others, just soaked in a brine spiced with garlic, chilies, and wild herbs. Either way, they pack a punch. And yes, before you ask, this is breakfast food. Not the star of the plate, maybe, but a welcome accent. A little scoop of this beside your porridge or injera gives your palate a quick wake-up slap, like a wet cloth in a warm room. Not rude, just assertive. Nearby, there's a smaller jar. Inside, pickled garlic. Not the crisp little cloves you know from supermarket shelves, but soft, almost jammy bulbs that have mellowed under weeks of patient steeping. You're offered one. You hesitate, then take it. It's weird, but weird in a way that makes your eyebrows rise and your mouth go, huh. Sweet, earthy, sour. You want another. You pretend to think about it for a few seconds before grabbing one more. Historians still argue whether these pickled condiments were everyday staples or occasional luxuries. Some suggest only wealthier households had the clay storage jars and the time to pickle at scale. Others believe even rural farmers practiced small-scale fermenting using gourds or repurposed pottery. One theory posits that during the reign of Amda Seonwon, pickled goods were even used as barter during seasonal trade, exchanged for salt or woven fabric. No one's found a definitive answer yet, but your tongue doesn't seem to care. It is busy trying to process 10 flavor notes at once. Now here comes the quirky bit. There's a kind of pickled milk. Yes, you heard that right. Think of it as a proto-yogurt, or more precisely, ergo. Made by letting raw milk sour naturally in earthen jars, it's somewhere between drink and spread. A spoonful is passed your way. You brace yourself. It's tangy, thick, and cooling. A little chalky, maybe, but strangely refreshing, especially after all that spice. A favorite among herders and travelers, it was portable, long-lasting, and could be mixed with roasted grains for a sort of rudimentary breakfast bowl. Imagine a medieval smoothie, minus the blender and with more barnyard overtones. You learn something charming. Certain households gave names to their pickling jars, usually after ancestors or legendary cattle. Old Adugna makes the sharpest garlic, someone jokes, patting the side of a particularly mossy jar. But be careful, he bites. You laugh, quietly, because this place seems to invite quiet laughter. Another jar is brought out, filled with pickled okra. Slimy? Yes, but in a warm, slick way, like cooked mushrooms. It's flavored with wild lemon peel and crushed coriander seeds. You like it more than you expected. And, to your surprise, it pairs perfectly with the leftover keto mash from earlier, like tartness waltzing with starch. There's also a pickled root. Nobody is quite sure what it's called in modern terms. It looks like a stubby carrot and tastes like ginger met horseradish in a thunderstorm. It's used sparingly, mostly to wake up dishes that need a slap across the back of the neck. Then, in a final culinary curveball, you're shown something dark and chunky, almost black in color. It's dried beef preserved in spice-laced oil, quanta. Though not pickled per se, it often lived next to the pickles, its intense flavor mellowing over weeks of storage. It's chewy, peppery, and, if you're not careful, capable of unseating a loose tooth, but delicious nonetheless. You marvel at the balance of it all. Spice, salt, acid, fat. These aren't side dishes. They're little edible punctuation marks, each one changing how you taste the rest of the meal. A thought bubbles up as you watch the jars being closed again. Every one of these pickles tells a story of survival. They speak of preparing for droughts, feeding growing children, honoring guests, or just keeping the monotony of grain-based meals interesting. In a world without refrigerators or international shipping, these jars were magic. And you, lucky sleepy traveler, got to taste that magic before the noon sun even crossed the center of the sky. As the elder wipes their hands on their apron and reseals the jars, you exhale through your nose. Pickled greens, sour milk, funky garlic. These flavors linger like memories on your tongue, the sort that don't fade even after dreams. You've now become something of a breakfast connoisseur, at least by 14th century Ethiopian standards. Your belly is heavy with porridge, your fingertips still scented faintly of spiced butter, and your mouth humming from sour pickles and aged garlic. But don't you dare start dozing yet, because you haven't met the spice masters. Yes, they exist. Not in the lofty way modern chefs parade their white coats and Michelin stars. These are humble, quietly powerful people who guard the secrets of the land's most vital ingredient. Berber. You follow the sound of rhythmic grinding, a soft shoosh, 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 like distant waves lapping a quiet shore. It's coming from the shade of a fig tree, where a pair of women sit cross-legged working with a large, shallow mortar and smooth grinding stones. They're not just preparing a spice blend, they're conjuring history. Berber isn't one thing. It's a symphony. A base of dried red chilies, yes, but then in come the layers. Fenugreek, basil, ginger, black cardamom, long pepper, korarima, cloves, allspice, maybe even cinnamon bark scraped from a wild-growing tree. The exact mix? A family secret, passed down like lullabies, and argued over just as passionately. One woman leans in and adds a handful of sun-dried garlic flakes. The other rolls her eyes. "Too much garlic and it'll taste like monk's sandals," she mutters. You don't ask how she knows that. You take a seat nearby, feeling the heat of the midday sun filtered through fig leaves, watching the powder gather like red sand. The smell is deep, warm, a little dangerous. You sneeze once, quietly, and they both chuckle. Historians still argue about Berber's timeline. Some claim it existed in some form as far back as the Aksumite Empire, though it likely wasn't as chili-heavy until after chilies were introduced post-Columbian exchange. Others argue for earlier origins through trade with the Arabian Peninsula and India. But what's not debated? Its importance. Berber isn't just a seasoning, it's a foundation, the soul of a dish, the thing that makes your tongue sit up straight and salute. And it's not just for the kitchen. In some regions, women rubbed a softened version of Berber paste on their hands to scent their skin before festivals. In others, a diluted blend was used as a wash for livestock wounds. Think of it like the red gold of the highlands, Medicinal, culinary, ceremonial. You're handed a tiny pinch to taste. You're warned, just a pinch. You press it to your tongue. It starts sweet, then smoky, then something else entirely. Heat, yes, but not the kind that rushes and leaves. This is slow heat, thoughtful heat, like a debate you lose gradually. Suddenly, you understand how dishes like Doro Wat, chicken stew, derive their thunder. It's not just the onions and the butter, it's this magic dust. Berbere turns bland into bold, soft into steel, day into night. But don't go thinking it's the only player. No, because now someone brings over a clay bowl filled with a grainy green powder, mitmita. It's the feisty cousin of Berbere, hotter, finer, and sharper. It's made with tiny chili peppers, salt, cardamom, and a spice called ajwain that tastes a little like thyme with a grudge. Mitmita is not for breakfast, per se, but a sprinkle might land on some hard-boiled eggs if you're feeling cheeky, or be served alongside raw beef strips in more festive meals. For now, you just take a sniff, and then politely hand it back before it opens your sinuses permanently. The spice masters are joined by a younger girl, maybe 8 years old, dragging a bundle of fresh herbs behind her. Wild thyme, sacred basil, rue. Not for grinding today, but drying. These will be hung in a shaded loft and used to scent homes, flavor stews, and, in one case, deter the evil eye. You watch as the herbs are sorted by smell, not by sight. It's a quiet art, like arranging a bouquet by emotion. A soft story unfolds around you. How in one village a runaway goat once ate an entire stash of berbere, got lost for 3 days, and came back red-faced and furious. No one knows if it's true, but everyone laughs the same way every time it's told. You linger as the grinding slows and the red powder is swept carefully into small pouches made of linen scraps. These are tucked away like treasure, because they are. Not everything in this kitchen glitters, but this stuff? This could buy favors. Spices were currency, status, and flavor all in one. And here's your fringe fact of the day. In some areas, newly married women were judged not by their looks, dowry, or dance skills, but by the balance of their berbere blend. A smoky finish meant marriage material. A bitter edge? Back to the grinding stone. You take one last deep breath of the spice air, your nose tingling, your head light. This isn't a meal, it's a meditation. These women, in their quiet way, are guardians of balance. A little hot, a little sweet, a lot of patience. Now, you know, breakfast doesn't end at eating. It ends at seasoning, and with any luck, it never really ends at all. You've got the berbere heat still lingering on the back of your tongue, and the sun is finally starting to mellow, casting a warm glow that softens every edge around you. The kitchen compound hums a little quieter now, less clatter, more exhale. And you're about to slip into something even more soothing. Tea time. Or, as it would have been in 14th century Ethiopia, Tenadam time. Not the kind of high tea with tiny sandwiches and polished silver. No, this is earthier, simpler, more spiritual. You wander toward a smaller enclosure off to the side of the main kitchen where you catch the unmistakable scent of roasted herbs and something faintly citrusy. There's no tea bag in sight. Instead, nestled in a blackened clay kettle perched precariously over a slow coal fire, is an herbal infusion gently steaming its way into the afternoon. Tenadam, also known as Ethiopian rue, is the star of this brew. It smells like basil's wilder cousin and has a flavor that tiptoes somewhere between mint and pine, with a sharp little wink on the finish. It's not just for taste, it's medicinal, used to ease headaches, soothe nerves, and chase off bad winds. It's a popular pick for late morning or early afternoon sipping. Someone hands you a chipped clay cup. It's warm. You take a cautious sip. It's bitter at first, like licking a green twig, but then a wash of warmth spreads through your chest. You breathe deeper. You feel calm. Just don't drink too fast. You're told roux likes to argue with your stomach if taken with arrogance. Historians still debate how widely roux was cultivated during the 14th century. Some believe it grew wild along the cooler, forested ridges of the Ethiopian highlands. Others suggest households kept potted roux on stone ledges outside kitchens, both for cooking and protection, spiritually speaking. Whether sacred or simply handy, it was often plucked fresh and thrown into boiling water with a handful of crushed lemongrass or a twist of dried orange peel. No need for sugar. The bitterness was part of the ritual. And speaking of rituals, this isn't your average make-and-go kind of tea. There's a whole rhythm to it. The water is poured in circles. The herbs are added with a little murmured prayer. The pot rests on warm ash, not flame, to coax rather than command the flavors. It's almost meditative. Nearby, someone begins cracking open what looks like a gourd. Inside, honeycomb, not just any honey, forest honey, drawn from wild hives tucked into high tree hollows. It's smoky, sharp, and dark as molasses. You're offered a finger's dip. You taste. Your eyebrows rise. A small drizzle is added to a second cup of Tenedam tea, just enough to round the edges. It's not sweet. It's sweet like memory, like something a grandmother would hum into your ear. You learn that tea, in this context, wasn't about caffeine jolts or social chatter. It was quiet time, digestive pause, a reset between the bustle of preparing food and the work that follows. And while the now famous Ethiopian coffee ceremony was already emerging in some regions by the 14th century, especially around Kaffa, it hadn't yet eclipsed the humble tea ritual in many rural highland homes. There's something profoundly sleepy about this moment. You cradle the clay cup like it's made of baby bird bones. Steam curls against your cheek. The breeze carries a hint of eucalyptus from the trees beyond. A child giggles from behind a stone wall, and a dog gives one slow tail thump in the dust. You think back on the morning, on the porridge, the pickles, the fire-charred flatbreads, the Berber drama, and now this earthy sip of roux and honey, and you realize breakfast wasn't just a meal. It was a map, a way to understand not just food, but rhythm, patience, family, trade, survival. Quirky tidbit. You're told some believe Tenedam can predict your mood. If it tastes sharp to you, you're harboring anger. If it tastes mellow, you're at peace. You check your cup again. Mellow. You smile to yourself. You sit back on your elbows, cup now empty, and someone fans the kettle off the coals. The warm stones beneath you radiate just enough heat to lull you into a half nap. You catch someone wrapping the leftover herbs in a twist of cloth to hang in the rafters. Nothing is wasted. Even the dregs of the pot will be poured onto the soil near the doorway. An offering of sorts. As your eyes close briefly, you hear one last whisper from the old woman beside you. Tea tells the truth of a household. Food can impress, but tea reveals. And you believe her.